Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Ishi and it has been a while. It has been about 3 or 4 months since the last time I filmed my face, so I'm back. Today I am here to talk to you about the top 10 books I read in 2020. In 2020, my goal was to read 50 books and I ended up reading 54, so I am very happy about that. 36 books I read were fantasy, 8 of them were contemporary, 3 of them were non-fiction, 2 of them were science fiction, 2 of them were thriller, 2 of them were also classics, and 1 was historical fiction. So not a lot of range going on in my reading habits. Now, out of those books, 24 of them I read physically, 18 were on audiobook, and 12 were ebooks, so I'm pretty happy about that. And lastly, 20 of them I gave 5 stars, 12 of them got 4 stars, 15 of them got 3 stars, 5 got 2 stars, and only 2 books got 1 star. This was the first time I tried calculating all these statistics out for my books, so that was super interesting to look at the end of the year. Now, getting right into the top 10 books, I'm going to start off the ones I liked relatively less and make my way up to my most favorite book of the year. So the first book I will be talking about is Murder on the Orient, Express by Agatha Christie. I listened to this audiobook and it was one of the best audiobooks I have ever listened to in my entire life. I picked this audiobook up because Meg from Meg with Books recommended this audiobook in her audiobook recommendation video, so it was pretty short. I decided to listen to it and I was very surprised because this is very much out of my bookish comfort zone. So when I started reading it, I was kind of skeptical, but the more I listened to this audiobook, the more and more surprised I was. It was amazing. This is the only audiobook I have listened to on normal speed because usually I speed it up to twice the speed, but this book was just that good. It follows a detective named Poirot who is on this really long journey by train, and all of the other passengers are getting to know one another, but then one night one of the passengers gets murdered. The same night there was this huge snowstorm outside and the train breaks down, so now they're stuck in the middle of nowhere with a murder on their hands and they can't call the police because they're in the middle of nowhere. So Detective Poirot takes over the case and he starts interviewing different people on the train to figure out what happened. Honestly, I've never really had a great urge to read books by Agatha Christie before, but this book definitely did it for me. I haven't read any others yet, but this year I definitely will look at picking up some of her other books because this was truly amazing. There is a movie for this book as well that I also watched. I highly recommend you guys read this book or listen to this audiobook because I feel like I would not have enjoyed the plot as much as I did if I had read it physically. So if you are going to read this book, I recommend listening along with the audiobook as well. I ended up giving this book 5 stars. The next book on my top 10 books of 2020 list is The Bitter Kingdom by Ray Carson. I read this book as part of a read-along hosted by Nicole from Nicole and Her Books, and the other hosts were Meg from Meg with Books and Simone from Chasing Pages and myself. This was the 3rd book in the series and it was so good. It was surprisingly good. The series follows a girl named Elisa who at the age of 16 is married off to this king of another kingdom. So she has to go off to another country and learn how to deal with the politics there, and I love reading about court politics, especially in fantasy books, so I was very much enjoying it. Elisa is also the bearer of something called the Godstone, which means that she is chosen by God to do something great during her lifetime. So she has to learn how to be a competent queen of another country while also being the chosen one. It's all very stressful for her. To be honest, the first book in this series was quite mediocre and I gave it 3 stars. I loved the second book and I did not think anything would be able to top the second book, but this book came out of nowhere and blew me out of the water. The politics, the strategies, the missions that the characters go on, it was all so amazing and so well thought out. This is the last book in the series and I really love how everything ended. Some people might think that everything got wrapped up really nicely at the end, but I love that it did. I am so happy with how all the characters' storylines turned out. We really got to know the side characters well as well. I am so happy for them all. Originally, I had given this book 5 stars, but after a few weeks, I brought it down to a 4 stars because even though I really enjoyed this book, it could have been written a bit better. The plot, amazing. The characters, amazing. Hector, the literal love of my life. But I think the writing could have been done a little bit better, which is why I ended up taking 1 star away. But still, it was one of the best books I read last year. The next book is one I surprised myself by deciding to include on this list. This book is not one I ever see myself rereading, but my enjoyment of it in the moment was 10 out of 10. I listened to the entire audiobook in less than a day, and that is no small feat because this book is more than 500 pages long. I just could not stop listening to the audiobook, and I am talking about Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. This is the second book after Strange the Dreamer, and Strange the Dreamer is about this guy named Laszlo Strange who has been obsessed with the lost city of Weep all his life. One day, warriors from this lost city of Weep come, and Laszlo gets the opportunity to actually go there. Usually, I don't like books when they're told through too many perspectives, but the fact that this book has so many perspectives is something I really liked about this book. I felt like we got to understand the characters and their motivations better, and all the different characters knew different things, so by reading through their different perspectives, it was like we were given different pieces of the same puzzle and we got to put everything together. What I really liked about this book was the fact that there was not a villain in the traditional sense. Everyone was just trying to do what was best for themselves and for the people they love, and in doing so, they found themselves at odds with each other for it. One very important aspect of this book was Laszlo and Sarai's relationship, but to be honest, I did not care a single bit about their relationship at all. Neither of those characters really interested me in this book, so I was like, just move on. I don't want to read about this. Earl Fane and his wife's relationship, however, was one that I can definitely get behind. That was peak romance. Overall, the writing was really beautiful, even though it was a bit cheesy at times. Like, the metaphors just were a tad too cheesy for my taste, but it was still all very beautiful, and the characters were really well developed. I liked the fact that the characters seemed to be their own people instead of being in the book for the sake of someone else, if you know what I mean. So amazing. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars as well. The next book, which I absolutely loved, was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. This book takes place in a world where magic does not exist anymore, and our main character, Zaylee, along with a bunch of other characters, are on this mission to bring magic back. There are 10 different clans, and each of the clans have power over a specific thing. Some clans have power over fire, some over water, some over air. There are clans with healing powers, and it's all very cool. There are several different point of views, and each is written in first person. I hate first person point of view with a passion, but this book was really well done that the first person point of view didn't really bug me at all. I enjoyed each of the different point of views equally. The pacing is really steady throughout, and I loved every single second of the plot, the writing style, the dialogue. I was hanging on to every single word. I was hanging on to the edge of my seat. This book made me feel all of the emotions, and it was truly amazing. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars as well. The next book isn't really a book, it's more of a collection of letters, but I wanted to include Letters to a Young Poet by Rilke on this list because it was an amazing piece of literature, truly beautiful. Please read it if you haven't already. Letters to a Young Poet are a collection of 10 letters written by Rilke to an aspiring young poet. And I think I said it in a previous video, but I felt truly privileged to have the opportunity to read something this personal and something this raw. It's truly a heartfelt piece of literature. It's just very moving. If you are a writer or someone who wants to start writing, I highly recommend you read this. It's very inspirational. It's very short, so it will barely take you like an hour, 2 hours max. And as strange as it feels to rate someone's letters, I did end up giving it 5 stars. The next book is one of the best sequels I read in 2020, and that is The Kingdom of Copper. This is the second book after The City of Brass. The City of Brass is about this girl named Nari who is kind of like a street rat, and she scams people to get money. One day she accidentally summons a djinn who whisks her away to Devabad, and there she learns about all the different tribes of jinn and devas, and she starts to understand her own place among them. The first book was okay. I gave it 3 stars, but this book, amazing. I was shook from page 1. It was so unbelievably good. I listened to it on audiobook, and once I started listening, I just could not stop. I did not like Nari in the first book, but in this book, I absolutely loved her. And in the first book, I also did not like Ali's chapters because I found them to be very boring. But in this book, he stepped it up. Like, his chapters were some of the best in the book. And Muntadir and Jamshid remain some of my favorite characters of all time. There were a couple things that I think could have been done better in this book. I would have loved to see some more female characters because there barely were any at all. And I would have liked if Nari was more independent rather than her having to depend on Ali all the time. I also like when magic has specific rules and regulations, which was not the case in this book. At the end, it felt like everything could have just been fixed with magic, and that I felt took away from the plot a little bit. But aside from that, the experience of reading this book was truly phenomenal. I ended up giving it 5 out of 5 stars as well. The next book on the list is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I love Leigh Bardugo. I love Six of Crows and King of Scars. So I really was looking forward to Ninth House because it was supposed to be different than all her other books, and I could not wait to get my hands on it. This book is about this girl named Alex who is invited to attend Yale on full scholarship and look after Yale's secret societies. These secret societies are deeply immersed with magic and the paranormal. Alex has always been aware of the supernatural world, but once she starts attending Yale, she is even more deeply immersed in this world than she was before. The pacing of this book is definitely slower than other fantasy books, but that is something I think works really well for this book. The things that happen in this book are so significant and so heavy that it takes you a while to really come to terms with it, and because of that, the slow pacing works really well. I love Alex, and I especially love Darlington. The second he was introduced into the story, I was already trash for him. I also really like Dawes and Turner, who are 2 other people also in charge of looking after the secret societies. I love all these characters. I love how they interact with one another, and I love how their relationship changes over the course of the book. They start out obviously not trusting each other, but that changes very subtly throughout the book, and it's all very interesting to read. I absolutely love this book, and I think the next book in the series is supposed to come out next year, so I cannot wait because the ending was something very specific about Darlington, and as Darlington is the love of my life, I need to read the next book. I ended up giving this book 4 stars, and I am someone who rates my books really objectively, so even though I really enjoyed this book, I think objectively it could have been a teeny bit better, which is why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5. There are books that I have given 5 stars because they were objectively that good, but I enjoyed them less than this one. It's just how I rate my books. The next book on this list is Spinning Silver. I absolutely loved it. A friend recommended this book to me, and if she had not recommended it, I would just have never read it ever, so I'm so glad she did. Thanks, Anna. This is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and the plot is absolutely fascinating. The book follows a girl named Miriam, whose father is a moneylender, and he is really soft-hearted, so he lends all this money out to people, but he lets them get away with not paying him back, and because of this, their family is really poor and struggling. One day, Miriam has had enough. She goes out and takes over his job, essentially. She does not let anyone get away with anything, and she even starts charging them interest. She's such a strong, amazing character, and I love her so much. The 2 other main characters are Wanda and Irina. All 3 of these characters are really strong, solid characters, but none of them really fit in the strong female character trope that a lot of YA books have, which is something I really enjoyed about this book because none of it is really stereotypical. The writing style is very beautiful, and this book is very atmospheric. I absolutely loved it. I ended up giving it 5 stars. The next book is The Girl Who Drank the Moon. This book was one of the biggest surprises of 2020 for me. I picked it up on a whim because Nicole recommended it, and I'm like, why not? But I started reading and I was like, wait a minute. This is actually so good.
She's really good.
I was not expecting to like this book as much as I did, but it ended up being one of my best reads of the year. It is something that I can see myself rereading many times in the future as well. This book is about a village that sacrifices a baby to the witch in the woods every single year. But the witch in the woods is actually a really nice person, and she does not understand why this village leaves a baby in the forest every single year. So every year she goes and takes this baby to another village to give the baby a better home. One year, she's rescuing this baby whose name is Luna, and she accidentally feeds the baby moonlight. And this gives Luna magical powers. So instead of giving Luna away, she brings Luna up herself. So we follow Luna from when she is a baby to when she's older and starts being able to use her magic. This book is so perfect that I cannot even tell you specifically why I liked it so much. Everything from the first page until the last is so good. I cannot pick out a single thing I disliked about this book. The storytelling is phenomenal. The writing is so whimsical and magical, and it just is so amazing. The imagery is very vivid. I can easily imagine the setting and the characters. There is a dragon, there is a little bog monster, and it's just so cute. This is a middle grade book, so everyone needs to read this book. Please read it. I absolutely loved it, and I will definitely read it in the future again. And last but not least, the best book I read in 2020, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. At the end of the year, when I make my best books of 2020 list, you can expect to see this book on there. That is how much I loved it. I don't think anyone is surprised because I have gushed about this book on my channel for a long time, so hopefully you saw this coming. This book is about this girl named Rin who is a war orphan and she wants to become a soldier. She takes this test to test into a military academy, and no one really expects her to do well because she's an orphan and she's really poor. But surprisingly, she ends up achieving the best score in her province. And because of this, she wins a full scholarship to the best military academy in the empire. She goes there and she's all excited, but she finds out once she's there that all of the other students are already way ahead of her in the curriculum because they grew up very differently from her. They grew up rich, they had tutors, and they already knew what to expect. Rin, on the other hand, has to work twice as hard to do as well as the other students. While she's there, one of the masters introduces her to shamanism, which I think added a very intriguing fantasy element to the book. The first half of this book is Rin at school, and the next half is the war, the Poppy War. All of the characters are so very well developed, and we get to find out more about them, and we get to see how war affected them each personally. I loved every second I spent reading this book, which is something I have said about most of the books on this list, but it is my top 10 book list, so the plot was amazing, the writing style was amazing. One thing I really enjoyed in this book was that there was a lot of foreshadowing. I loved connecting all of the foreshadowing to things that actually ended up happening in the book. There was also a lot of traveling going on, so we get to explore the map of this world a lot as well, which I also liked. Rebecca Kuang was obviously very knowledgeable about what she was writing about, and I just cannot believe that this is her debut novel that she started writing when she was 19 years old. It just blows my mind every single time I think about it. It's just so amazing. So amazing. I also read The Dragon Republic last year, which is the second book in the series, and it was also amazing. It was also one of the best books I read in 2020, but while I was making this list, I did not want to include multiple books from the same series on there. But for honorary mentions, I also really liked The Dragon Republic. I also liked Children of Vengeance and Virtue, which is the second book after Children of Blood and Bone. Those two books I would have loved to include on this list, but I already had the first book in the series, so I decided not to. Those are the top 10 books I read in 2020. Let me know what are some of your favorites you read last year as well. I would love to hear your thoughts. If any of the books I have on my list were ones that you really liked as well, talk to me about them anytime. Thank you so much for spending time with me. My name is Ishi, and I hope your day is as wonderful as you are.